Sometimes the hero you want to be isn't the hero you need to be. From the moment they landed on the swampy planet Vodran, J Squadron's mission from Admiral Ackbar has been a disaster, and now Mattis, Lorica, AG-90, and Joe have been captured by the First Order. Can things get any worse? Of course they can. Joe immediately turns traitor and abandons his Resistance squad mates, and AG is taken away to be reprogrammed as a villainous First Order droid. Forced to rely on each other, can the squabbling Mattis and Lorica work together to escape before they are forced to give up Resistance secrets? Meanwhile, Dek and Sari land on a mysterious moon and encounter unexpected inhabitants, a group of outspoken droids, and the infamous Hera the Hutt. Hera might be able to help Dek and Sari save their friends, but bargaining with a Hutt rarely goes as planned. These wannabe Resistance heroes will need quick thinking and even quicker moves if they are going to survive.
Hello, younglings, and welcome back to the Padawan Library, the only Star Wars Junior novel podcast. And like a couple of Sith troopers, we are a very well-read podcast. I'm Levi Paratic, and with me, Tim May.
Yes. Yes, that's me, Tim. This is the Sith troopers. This was announced literally last night, right?
Yes.
And we're recording this literally less than 10 hours before it goes up. This is the latest we've ever recorded an episode.
Current, yeah, we are current. We are on the pulse
current.
For one.
So if you're listening to this Friday morning, you're like, oh man, that Sith Trooper news is new. Normally they're talking about stuff from like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. But no, this book is 300 pages, guys, and, there's a lot going on.
So there's a ton going on.
We're both very busy, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Why are we making excuses? You're getting the episode on time, so we shouldn't feel bad about it.
Well, so the whole reason this they announced who this trooper is because this is their big thing for San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, wow.
They are doing a Stormtrooper retrospective, and they will have every version of every Stormtrooper armor on display.
That's fun.
Which there's a ton now because Disney has to have at least 1 to 2 in every movie.
Let's be fair. I saw some people making this complaint, but if you look at the original trilogy, there are new Stormtrooper designs.
Yes,
in
I
each
know.
movie. Come on.
I know.
Yeah.
But
and when they introduce clone troopers, it's not like there's new clone trooper designs in Sith after that too. So the only Star Wars movie that does not introduce new stormtrooper designs is Phantom Menace.
True.
So
you got me there.
To be fair,
maybe I'm just being a stink about these Disney stormtroopers. I don't know.
I'm fine. I didn't think there needed to be a new stormtrooper design in Rogue One. That was the one that annoyed me more than anything else. I'm fine with the designs in the new trilogy. They look good. And my problem with this is not so much the design. It looks cool. Red Stormtrooper, cool. Sith Trooper?
Which is interesting, being that our main villain, Kylo Ren, does not himself identify as a Sith Lord.
Which has always been dumb and pointless, and basically just, we don't like the prequels and don't want to associate it with the prequels, let's be fair.
Right, I agree.
How is he not a Sith? Everything about his point of view is Sith related.
I know, and Snoke... And Snoke doesn't identify as a Sith either. Like, what is going on there? I do not... And, like, it's not even, like... They not only did they not identify as Sith, but they don't take the Darth surname either.
Yeah, I don't understand any of it. And listen, you know, like we've said many times, we're both fans of the new movies. We like the new movies, but there's just a lot of weird, like, decisions, seemingly arbitrary decisions that were made just to differentiate them from the past in like I said, arbitrary fashion. So it's kind of strange. But Sith troopers, we'll see. I assume, you know, maybe Kilo in the time between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker has embraced the Sith legacy or something.
We can hope. Yeah. And what's funny too
and
is
he's fully in charge of the First Order now, so that would make sense if he had the pull to like create the new
Supreme Leader Ren. I assume would be his title. So yeah. They also, not only did they release a photo of this Sith Trooper, they released every piece of merchandise, images of every piece of merchandise that features this character. Everything from action figures to Lego sets to the Halloween costume. They, like, for whatever reason, they hyped the hell out of this.
I cannot believe it. Like, seeing little kids in Stormtrooper get-ups has always bummed me out, but, that's a whole other subject.
We won't go into that right now.
Anyway, I just, you know, they are called stormtroopers. Just putting out that out there. Anyway, so, I just wanted to let everyone know we normally talk for a while here at the beginning of the episode, and then we take a break, and then we talk about the book. This book is 320 pages long. So we're just kind of, you know, we got a couple other little pieces of business to deal with at the top here, but we're going to jump right into the review pretty quick here. So you got one other big piece of like news, right? Batu news.
Oh yes. Bright suns and rising moons. Oh, no. I'm Levi Paratic, and this is Batu News. Our top story: tainted pudding during a wedding causes a gastrointestinal disturbance for guest. Wait a minute. No. I'm receiving a piece of news. Okay. This just in, ladies and gentlemen. The Rise of the Resistance ride will be opening in Walt Disney World on December 5th, 2019, and in Disneyland on January 17th, 2020. Touted as being the longest and most technically advanced attraction ever built, this announcement comes as a surprise to some, as there were some people hoping that the Disneyland version would open first, being that the land has been open since May. That's all for tonight, but join us tomorrow when we'll be broadcasting live from Toydarian Toymakers for the 3rd annual Twi'lek Toy Drive. Until then, may the spires keep you. I'm Levi Paratic. Back to you, Tim.
Yeah, okay, cool. So, this segment, I feel like I don't know if it needs to be an every week thing.
No, I don't think it does either.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to it. Isn't it like 30 minutes, the Rise of the Resistance thing?
30 to 40 minutes is what it's... yeah, I know. No ride has been 40 minutes since Ellen's Universe of Energy.
Yeah, and that's basically a show or a movie. It's not really a ride.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We'll see how it goes. Maybe we will get to ride it. In the near future. We'll see.
Maybe.
We'll talk off air about that. So, we're going to move right into the review. We still vamped for 7 minutes, but, it's fine. So, this book, Star Wars Join the Resistance, Escape from Vodran. This is the second book in the Join the Resistance trilogy, or was it even supposed to be a trilogy? We'll talk about that in a second. We read the first one a few weeks back. If you didn't hear that episode, go back and check that out. We were pretty lukewarm on the first book, I think, is the fairest assessment. I felt like they were the two writers, Ben Blacker and Ben Acker, were clearly new to writing prose, and I just felt, and we'll talk about that on this one too, I just felt like a lot of it, the writing was very cutesy. A little too I don't know. We'll talk.
They're a little wordy.
It's not the wordiness so much that bothers me. Like, my favorite writer is, a very left field crazy choice for your favorite writer. My favorite writer is Charles Dickens, and he's a very wordy writer also. But I don't feel, and again, let's not compare these two Star Wars licensed writers to the greatest writer in the English language. But I just felt like there's lots of just kind of asides and jokes that are like they come from writing for television and comics, and they also wrote like a podcast, which is what they're most well known for. And like a lot of it is like very like things that can be funny maybe as an aside, like when you're listening to something, that are less funny written on the page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that. You see where they're trying for humor, and it just like a physical humor sometimes it feels like, and it just doesn't quite come off. We posted an interview that I stumbled upon at StarWars.com where they were interviewed.
It was just one of
before
them,
the first book.
Blacker, I believe.
Oh, okay. Oh, classic. Not I had nothing else to say. I didn't know what to say to that. I have no clue. But anyway, it's an interview talking about the first book specifically, because it was before the first book came out, and they kind of talk about some of the various behind the scenes in this book, and one of the startling, I guess, revelations is that you said it was Blacker, or is it Acker?
It's Blacker.
Okay, so Blacker was asked which Star Wars movie is his favorite, and strangely, not that this is strange, but if this is your favorite Star Wars movie, then I don't know if you should be listening to this podcast. No shots, but he said Force Awakens is his favorite. His favorite.
He
one.
said it's the most well made, which is listen, I like The Force Awakens, and I'm not like a huge like angry anti-Disney Star Wars person. I love The Last Jedi, like I love it, and that movie wasn't out, to be fair, when this interview took place. But I just feel like there's more to. First of all, it's not the most well-made Star Wars movie. That's just really kind of a falsehood. I'm sorry. Like the storytelling, the writing is not as good as the writing of and I'll use a movie that's not my favorite Star Wars movie. The Empire Strikes Back is my second favorite, but it's not my favorite. That's a better screenplay. It's just more well structured. It's more. It's just it's a lot better. Like the structure of the Force Awakens screenplay is very classically bad. So like I don't know what to tell you. So
it's also not the original movie of all of them either. There's a lot of callbacks, some nostalgia to some previous Star Wars
and
movies.
Like a lot of
reused mechanics.
That part's not as big a deal to me. I think it's whatever. It does not matter. He can like whatever movie he likes. But it's actually very evident reading this because he gets very, we'll talk about it. There's a big thing to talk about with this book that we are really on top of it. The first real people to talk about this, but
yes, we are breaking new ground. As we are the first. We're like the first men on the moon. We are the first people to review this book on YouTube. There has been no reviews of this book on YouTube. Yes.
And I'm not positive about that podcast-wise, but I'm pretty sure no podcast reviews. I'm sure there have been like some written reviews here or there. I'm not trying to... Amazon
has a couple, which we will read two at the end of the episode.
We did live for the last book, and I actually thought the Amazon review made me like the book more because I thought it was too harsh. I'll say that.
Well, these aren't harsh. These aren't harsh. These are very silly. They're short and silly.
Okay,
we'll
get to that at the end. But I will say this about these books, generally speaking. When I look back on them, I think, oh, there's some interesting ideas here. I kind of like some of these characters. I'm glad to get some more context for this period in the new timeline. But, my problems all still stand. But I do want to be fair up front and say that there are things to like about these books. And I'm certainly not, I just, this interview I thought was, interesting. I was curious about the behind-the-scenes process and stuff. They apparently gave them quite a bit of freedom, which is pretty evident when you read this book.
Very evident in this book.
And that's fine, by the way. I want Lucasfilm to operate that way. As a fan, because sometimes you might get something you don't like, but you're much more likely to get something that's interesting and bold, And as I've said many times, I'm a big fan of The Last Jedi, so I'm glad that I'm glad they have some leeway. Some of these guys, not all of them, obviously, and the movies are higher stakes, but I don't know. This, okay. Yeah, I don't know. The interview is interesting. It's worth going and checking out if you've read these books. And if you guys read these books in preparation for the podcast, I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Because I hope you liked the books, of course. But if you didn't, I really do appreciate it because that means you're really into the podcast. So I appreciate that. Anyway,
yes. All right, let's get into this. The book opens with a dedication, and I want to read the dedication first, then go into chapter 1 because it feels like they are very related. So here it is. This book was begun shortly after we lost Carrie Fisher, and her wit, strength, and humor in dark times loom large over it. Acker and Blacker wish to dedicate this book to Carrie, Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Anthony Daniels, Peter Mayhew, George Lucas, and everybody who created the playground in which we now get to play, as well as to JJ and Ryan and all of the people inspiring us in this playground.
All right. There's nothing, you can't say anything bad about that other than the Kenny Baker erasure that continues to happen all through. I just, you gotta, let's not take the lead from Anthony Daniels and discredit Kenny Baker's performance in the original trilogy.
Chapter 1. We open on a flashback, but not just any flashback, a Leia cameo flashback, in which she actually gets to speak because she only made a brief appearance in the last book, and I'm feeling that Acker and Blacker maybe felt like they made a mistake. We have on page 2 and 3 here, this is whenever our J Squadron caused the power outage while trying to raid the kitchen, or when they tried to, I can't remember what happened. Joe was sending a transmission to somebody or whatever. Right. This is when they're being punished by Akbar before they're sent to Vodran. A life, almost like a death sentence. Little do they know.
This is such a weird premise for the Resistance to be sending these 15-year-olds to some hostile death planet where they have no clue.
With no supplies.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep talking.
Yeah. So Leia comes in and she looks at them and says, "You're responsible for the power outage?" she asked. We're the screw ups, yes, ma'am. Duck answered with an uncharacteristic difference. Some of my best friends were screw ups, she said with a smirk. We need more screw ups around here. She left them feeling better for a moment. We jump from this little moment with Leia to now in a damp First Order cell, and we're reminded here because Mattis he's left alone to only his thoughts in this cold, dark cell that he believes he is a hero. A quick reminder that he is going to be a hero, yes. And he believes that he is Force sensitive despite knowing nothing of the Force. So, in case you forgot. So Mattis, he gets to think about his good old Rhodian buddy or best friend Klimo, who died apparently in the last book, and he begins to feel some guilt. He knows feeling bad won't get him out of his cell, but there's not much else to do there. So he starts to wonder, WWGOD, what would General Organa do? WW God.
Yes, I know what it is.
She dealt with loss and guilt her whole life, her whole planet was wiped out, and Mattis believes that her key must have been not dwelling on it for too long and channeling that energy into the spark that will light the fire that will burn the First Order down. And if he does this, then maybe he can become a hero, and maybe this will wake the Force up in him.
All right, I just want to say something about this whole thing. Listen, I appreciate the dedication, and obviously, the loss of Carrie Fisher is a big one. However, this character of Mattis has no particular connection to Leia, and Leia never appears in this book. Spoiler. And I just feel like it feels like the real life stuff influenced the character too much, because in the first book he does talk about the heroes of the galaxy, but he's very focused on Luke Skywalker, for one, incredibly focused on Luke, and does not seem particularly in awe of Leia in the first book. Does that, so I just, it was nice, but it didn't feel like it was really an organic part of the story in any real way.
Felt like they were obliged to it, because since they spent so much time having Akbar self-reference his fish head, they were like, oh damn, maybe we should have had Leia in the book. It would have made sense in the first book because of where we fell, in this book, but we'll just open with this flashback that will just randomly interject her into something, but really have no actual impact to what has already occurred.
Yeah, it's I'm not mad about it. I just didn't think it was. I just thought it was a way to. If you're opening the book that way, then it would be nice if Leia made an appearance in the book. Because it's not the character's around at this point, and there'd be reason for the Resistance to maybe be like, hey, we sent these kids to this death planet, and we haven't heard from them in a while. Yeah.
So. From there, the story jumps back to when they were first captured by the First Order. They had gotten off their speeder bikes when they were taken by surprise and surrounded. Lorica, AG-90, and Mattis try to make a run for it, but they fail miserably. Mattis gets shot in the heel, which also I'm now realizing he got shot in the heel, but he's not injured, so he must have just been stunned in the heel. I have that here. And then AG, he gets his head all screwed up, he falls and his head's hanging off his body. And Joe, remember, he's a Gergerod, and he plays the Gergerod card, and he demands to speak with a commanding officer immediately. So from there, the First Order troopers lead them to Hera the Hutt's palace, now doubling as the First Order Detention Center. And upon their arrival, they are split up and taken to different cells. Mattis overheard that AG was being taken to be put on ice, whatever that means. And Mattis is taken to a small windowless cell with only a stool in it. He sits there for what he thinks is days, staring at the damp, cracked, moss-covered walls, and then he starts to think, WW, God, and has a dream that Leia and Akbar will come to his rescue.
Wouldn't that be cool if that happened in the book?
It would be. It would be the right thing for the Resistance to do, being that they should have never sent them to a death planet in the first place. When he awakes, he finds a blubbery, bald man in his cell wearing a First Order uniform. His name is Wanten, and he runs this joint. In exchange for information on the Resistance, he will give Mattis better accommodations. Mattis decides to keep his mouth shut. He ain't no narc. And Wanten is like, all right, well, then I'm going to go talk to your lady friend, or I'll become your droid friend's new master, and I'll make him talk. Oh, and by the way, your Gergerod buddy, he's a spy. Whoa. He told me everything. So as Wanten is walking away, he tells a stormtrooper, he says, hey, if this kid gives his name, transfer him to a cell with a bed. And in that moment, Mattis pipes up and tells them who he is.
Wow, weak-ass Mattis. Anyway, so
Too true.
So
Anytime, do you know the Progressive commercials where it's the old ladies and the one lady has like a bunch of photos on her wall and she thinks it's Facebook and she's like pointing at them like, oh, I like your post and whatever. And then the one old lady is like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. That's what I think every time Mattis thinks he's force sensitive.
Oh my god. Well, we're going to talk a lot about Mattis and his quote-unquote force sensitivity. And also there's a lot to talk about Jedi-wise in this book that infuriated me, but okay. So, God, no, you're getting me hot early. Anyway, so Wanton, he's this kind of middle manager of this dumpy outpost on Vodran. He's not actually very powerful in the First Order. He was apparently a former Empire stormtrooper who was stationed on Tatooine, and he made an unspecified mistake as a young man, and it's apparently kept him from rising significantly in rank in the Empire and now the First Order. Even though he was a stormtrooper, piece of shit, he looked down on the Hutts because they had slaves. There's one thing about the new canon that bothers me, this attempt to soften the Empire. Like, in all previous versions of Star Wars, the Empire is fully engaged in the slave trade in the galaxy. It's even mentioned, I believe, in New Hope, isn't it? There's some vague reference to
Well, I mean, they slaved the Wookiees.
Yeah.
Infamously, enslaved the Wookiees.
So this idea that this guy that through the whole book shows no particular moral backbone or courage would look down on the Hutts because they have slaves seems dubious to me. But whatever. Because of his antipathy towards the Hutts, though, he appreciated being able to dislodge Hera the Hutt from power on Vodran. That was his assignment. He enjoyed that part of it. But he's getting bored because it's a disgusting planet and he's just in this kind of palace that's falling apart around him. And so, but he figures he can get some good information out of these resistance brats, and he may finally get a promotion. So he goes to see Joe Gergerod, and who he does seem to be cooperating with him. Joe suggests getting Mattis, Lorica, and AG all in a cell together with another prisoner who may desperately report back what they're talking about. So they want to put them in a cell with a spy. Wanton wants to dump the droid, AG, but Joe argues that he should be allowed, Joe, should be allowed to reprogram AG, perhaps as a guard for the other prisoners. And Wanton likes that idea specifically. He claims it for himself and invites Joe to supper.
So, Chapter 3, Lorica is taken to a cell with 2 sets of bunk beds. Full of frustration, she wants to kick the bunks, but she's afraid they'll break, so instead she rips off a mattress and hurls it against a wall. It doesn't give her the aggressive satisfaction she needs, so she kicks the bunk anyway, over and over. It hurts, but the pain makes her feel alive. She grabs the bunk and hurls it onto the floor. It breaks. She turns her attention to the other set of bunks. She goes to hurl it onto the floor, but a person under the covers falls out onto the floor, and she's like, oh my god, what have I done? So this new character, she's got a head full of hair, and she keeps talking to herself, and Lorica's like, maybe she's crazy. But we soon learn her name is Cost Nictor, and she believes that there is a scootling in the walls. There's something in the walls that she keeps hearing. So she gets up and starts running around screaming, and a stormtrooper rolls up and demands that Lorica get Cost to shut up. She says he's trying, but when the stormtrooper gives her more sass, Lorica runs up and begins to shake the cell bars while screaming in the stormtrooper's face. This gets the stormtrooper all hot and bothered, and he demands they open the cell so he can do Lord knows what to them. But another new character enters and sends this stormtrooper off to housekeeping. He's like, go get a mop, buddy. And this new character is Ingo Salic. He wears a cape. much like a certain director, and Lorica, and he's younger than Lorica expected,
Krennic.
and apparently, yes.
I was like, what are you talking about?
And this guy
I was like,
Ingo,
what,
he
does
reports.
Paul Thomas Anderson wear capes? I wasn't aware.
So this dude directly reports to Wanten, and he, in a long-winded way, much like everything else in this book, tells her to behave, and everything will be much easier for them. Oh, and by the way, they're getting a new cellmate, and just then Mattis is ushered into the cell, and let's see, and then it says Lorica takes off. So when they open the door for Mattis, Lorica decides to run out, and she gets stunned, like, immediately. The blasters were ready, and when she wakes, her bed is put back together, and Mattis is there with her and Cost, and he explains that Wanten told him that Joe is a traitor, but Lorica, she doesn't believe it. You know, her and Joe were close, you know, and Joe's got this complicated relationship with his first order parents. So, she doesn't want to believe that he's a traitor. Like, they thought he kind of was before, but he's not. Who knows? And she's also hopeful that Dek and Sari, because remember, they actually got off the planet at the last book, that they're going to come back. But Mattis, he's not as hopeful.
So, meanwhile, in orbit, Dek and Sari have been unable to hail the transport ship that the Resistance supposedly had to transport their supplies, which was their original assignment on Vodran, because they were being punished or whatever. Again, insane. Like, this, the transport ship is apparently not in orbit of the planet, like, anymore. Like, that's, like, what did the Resistance just be like, well, who cares about those kids? Let's just bring the ship back. I don't understand.
No,
and by the way, that is never followed up on in this book. It might be the third one, I don't know. But anyway, so Dek had convinced Sari not to return to the surface should they face more beasties. If you remember, there are a lot of beasties in the last book. And they've been waiting a couple of days, haven't talked much since then. Are both kind of shell-shocked, and so Sari... But then Sari does call Dek in to the cockpit, and she found some static on the radio. Could it be AG or Mattis or Lorica trying to contact them? No! It's a stern voice ordering them to identify themselves. Dek just says that, we're just really lost, man. And and the voice informs them that they're sending 3 sentry ships. First order sentry ships, of course. Dek takes off out of orbit.
So, meanwhile, back on Vodran, Kost, Lorica, and Mattis are taken to the Fold, and the Fold is a fancy first-order lingo for the prison yard. And like most yards on Vodran, it's mostly mud. So they walk out, they see some large thug-looking species playing Onge Ball. Lorica and Mattis decide to stay clear, but Kost, she seems intrigued by this. We still have no idea who this character is or how long she's been there, but these two take no consideration, for they grab her hand and they drag her along to sit at a table. However, on the way, Mattis runs into a Gamorrean who is playing Onge Ball, and this ends up somehow... I have it here in a long-winded way. Mattis and Lorica end up fighting not the Gamorrean, but a Gigaran, which is a species that was first introduced in Rogue One. This is a very tall, white, hairy creature, kind of like a Wookiee. It can be seen on Jedha, especially when like the insurgents attack the Empire and are stealing the Kyber crystals. That's when you can see one of these. Kost tells them that her name is Yamos. But this doesn't stop them from fighting her, and Lorica discovers that rubbing Yamos's head seems to calm her down, but they all end up getting shocked by an electro jabber, and they're surprised to see that AG, their old buddy, Dek's brother, is the one holding the electro jabber, and he now has a First Order insignia painted on his chest.
Damn. So, back to Dek and Sari. They're weaving in between all kinds of space junk as they're running away from these First Order sentries. They lose one of their tails by outmaneuvering them between that space junk. And the other, they lose another one when they're pulled in the orbit of a small moon. They fly down to the surface.
Uh-huh.
They fly down to the surface of this moon, which doesn't show up in any scans. Very interesting. Why? How could that be? We don't know. Sari suggests that they hide out there because even the First Order would have trouble tracking them if the moon doesn't show up on scans. Though the third sentry ship did see them enter the atmosphere. So she points out a plain-looking compound on the surface and suggests they head toward it. Dek, on the other hand, has a very bad feeling about this.
So, back in their cells, Lorca and Mattis are getting hungry. Cost, meanwhile, she's still obsessing over the scootling in the walls that nobody seems to hear. So Mattis, he thanks Lorca for saving his butt from Yamas, and she laughs because this is for the first time that Mattis didn't actually do anything wrong and still nearly got killed. And while their conversation is fun at first, it turns and they start blaming for each other for the mess they're in. Mattis accuses Lorca of being Joe's girlfriend, and Lorca accuses Mattis of being Dek's boyfriend. Whoa, homophobia. Meanwhile, Cost, she's like repeatedly screaming, like, "Can't you hear it? Can't you hear it?" And they're not sure why they're arguing. They must be hangry. And AG shows up, and he's like, "Pipe down."
Internet word.
Yeah, and
on your part is
hangry?
I'm not a fan of that.
That's
word.
not an internet word.
Oh, wherever it originated, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. Hangry.
Well, that's good to know. And duly noted. I will make sure that stays in my
as much
vocabulary.
People can say whatever they want. It's not my favorite.
So after this interaction with AG, who tells them to shut up, they're convinced their friend is gone, reprogrammed to serve the First Order, and Cost, she starts to scream and rattle the cage some more. This causes Ingo to roll back into the picture, and Lorca, she approaches the bar to give him sass about how they haven't had any food, and he gets real close to the bars, and she gets real close to the bars. They're only a breath away from each other. They lock eyes. Ooh, steamy. And then, just then, Ingo, he reaches into his pocket and he slyly pulls out a rations packet, which he slips through the bars, and Lorca takes it, and he just kind of wanders off. And Mattis, he's stunned by what happened. He's like, "What did you do to him? Do you have the Force?" Because he's heard of Jedi mind tricks before, and he's just like, "Oh, I cannot believe it." And she explains that since she's a Zeltron, that it's believed that they emit pheromones that can calm and attract people to them. And Mattis, he starts to think about how ever since he's met Lorca, he's always found himself drawn to her, despite her always being mean to him. But now they're friends, he's seen how good of a person she is, and he knows that he's got some feelings bubbling up inside of him for her. So, this has happened apparently once before. This is not the first time Mattis has caught in feelings for a girl. The first one was back on his home planet of Dirkteal with a girl named Jinbi, and he was able to resist the urge and keep it in the friend zone, but now he's questioning all his feelings for Lorica. And then I have here, note, Mattis sucks. And and so this all leads to Lorca coming up with an escape plan. She's going to make Ingo fall in love with her and convince him to let them out. Mattis comes up with his own plans. He thinks they're going to eventually be put to work, and maybe he can get some scraps, some tools, and something that he can use to dig their way out of their cell.
So, meanwhile, back on that moon, Dek is really nervous about this bunker they're heading for. And it's a bit all foggy, super foggy. Sari is like, what other option do we have? You know, we can't return to the surface of Voltron. Not Voltron. Is it Voltron?
I'm not sure, to be perfect.
The planet.
Vodran.
Vodran. I've got the book digitally, so it's not in front of me. So I'm sorry.
It's in the title of the book.
I know, it's not in front of me. I don't know what to tell you. The notes are, and my file says "Escape from Vodran." I could have looked up a couple inches, but I didn't. So anyway, they can't go back to planet Voltron, and but as they approach this compound, they see an oddball collection of droids emerging from the fog, some of whom are armed, and they all begin to surround them. Deck tries to talk them down, but eventually they capitulate to being captured. Just as they're being taken into the compound, a First Order ship lands.
Oh, all right. We're on to Chapter 9. This chapter is about 30 pages, so bear with me, folks.
You got all the longest chapters this week.
I know.
I got
wanted to die.
Every chapter I've covered so far was like 4 or 5 pages.
And I finished this book easily a week ago, so I don't remember anything. So I'm literally reading my notes verbatim. Which I did not review. So the jailbirds are tossing and turning in bed. Nobody's sleeping. Mattis, his mind starts to wonder to the same old BS. Will I be a hero? Am I force sensitive? Are my friends coming? Yeah. And
this
then
is a problem. I just let's just stop and have a short conversation about this. In the last episode, Join the Resistance episode we did, I complained a lot about specifically the character of AG, because I just have an issue with kind of droid rights as a symbol for actual human rights. I think is a weird, it's not my favorite metaphor in general, and especially not in Star Wars, because that makes Luke Skywalker a slave master. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever. But AG is at least, kind of an interesting character. I think most of the supporting cast in these books, I like fine. I think they're all interesting enough characters. Mattis sucks. You're right about this.
Mattis is the
worst.
worst.
Mattis is so boring. Why is he the main character? I don't know.
He is the most boring, generic hero, and he's an idiot. He's not smart. He's not a genius. He has no wit, no charm. He's just dumb.
It's like how I felt about Ezra Bridger in the first 5 episodes of Rebels before they made him interesting. You know what I mean? But it's this is 2/3 of the way through the series now, and it's just I guess this is just who Mattis is. I'm not a fan.
Mattis sucks. So, Cost, she startles him, and in the middle of the night, and she tells him there's a universe beyond them, a universe with things beyond explanation. And this leads to an argument, because Mattis thinks she's talking about the Force, and for what feels like the 100th time, we're reminded that Mattis believes he's Force sensitive, but he doesn't verbally convey this to his cellmates. I'm gonna go on record. If Trioculus is 0.5 Force sensitive, Mattis is 0.75 Force sensitive. Because he has no idea what the Force is at all. So Koss tells him, no, this is a force of evil. And back when Hera the Hutt ran the place, these cells were her torture pits. And Kost implies that she was around when Hera still ran the place, and that there was so much evil that fills the walls of this place that anybody trapped within the walls have their hope sucked away from them. Once you hear the scraping in the walls, you know you're almost gone. But when you hear the man laughing in the walls, that's when you know there's no hope for you. Your mind is lost. So Mattis starts pissing his pants scared. He asks how can he prevent this from happening, and Koss tells him to never lose hope. He asks her if she has lost hope, and she goes into her backstory here. And apparently she came to Vodran on a fishing trip, and she was fishing for Daiganas because apparently they make good soup. And some of Hera's posse they stumbled upon her and they captured her and they brought her to Hera the Hutt's palace, hoping Hera would find her entertaining. But what Hera did find entertaining was making her various beastie pets battle each other. And Koss describes a tentacle creature that she calls a jelly beast that she met when she was brought to Hera's. And she claims that before she was there, she knew she had parents who had lost her and another set of foster parents who took her in. But she can't remember any of them because this jelly beast sucked them all out. And this jelly beast sounds an awful lot like Borgullet from Rogue One. So that's 2 Rogue One creatures in this book.
Well, to be fair, these books came out like within the year after Rogue One. These were like 2017.
Well, this book came out in 18, I believe. This book came out in July 18.
Okay.
So it a little bit before Last Jedi. So, but yeah, Rogue One would have been the previous movie.
17.
7. Wait, no, like
18 was
Rogue One. Yeah, so that would have been. Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Rogue One was 2016.
So this is. Yes, you're right. Never mind. My years are all mixed up.
It's
I don't
fine.
know what year it is anymore.
We're all living. It feels like the longest year of all time for the last like 4 years. Anyway,
I know it's a hellscape. Anyway, when the First Order shows up, Hera was forced to release all her pets into the wild, but the creatures they keep coming back because Hera gave them easy meals. So Wanton, he built a fence around the place. But the creatures keep tearing him down, so he's got to keep building him again. But Koss, she's like, at least he's not making them fight, so maybe things are better this way. Mattis, he feels bad for Koss, so he decides to give her something, his hope, and he tells her about how his buddies, Dek and Sari, they got away, and they're going to come back at any moment with the Resistance. And Koss, she lights up. She wants to know more about the Resistance. But then AG rolls in, and he tells them to shut the F up or he's going to electro jab them again. And he doesn't just crush hope. AG obliterates their hope because he tells them how the First Order chased their friends to a moon and they're goners for sure now. So, crushed, they all retreat back to bed, and Mattis, he's closing his eyes, he's trying to sleep, and suddenly he hears scratching in the walls. But that's not all, because we have a passage of time here within the same chapter, because this chapter won't end. So
Relax,
days go
you're
by.
fine. You're doing good.
I know. Okay. Days go by, and Mattis, he's a zombie. He's just zombie ing through life.
That is a
and
song.
yes, and they get assigned to construction duties. But since Mattis just sucks at everything, his feeble little arms can't lift anything, Lorica, she has to do all his work for him. She's doing it so that she can cover his butt and hers, so they don't get in trouble. And in the process, she ends up doing twice the work. And until one day, she's like, no more. Do your own damn chores, you little bitch.
Of course.
And
Team
so
Lorica.
the stormtroopers notice that Mattis isn't doing diddly squat, so they start to give him sass, which he returns with more sass. And they tell him to do his work or else, in which he replies, or else what? You'll put me back in my cell? Dumb response. And for the record, Mattis sucks. And I have here, he is contender to be the worst character in the new canon.
Ooh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have another one pop into mind right now. I like a lot of characters.
Right.
So. We'll see. All right, so Mattis keeps talking back to that stormtrooper, and eventually he just makes the unilateral decision to separate him from Lorica and send him out to work the perimeter, which he implies is more dangerous, more likely to be eaten by Tods. You remember those beasties from the last book?
No, I remember the Twads.
Yeah, so it's now his job to fix holes in the perimeter fence made by Rancors and the like, and other beasties. He's guarded by Patch, the stormtrooper, and Joe, who is apparently now full-blown First Order all the way. Also working with him is Emos, the kind of what was it, Gigarian or whatever it was?
Yeah, something like that.
So yeah, that he had the confrontation by. He's very intimidated by her, but he's given a weld bar to do the work, but it's taken from him at the end of each day, so he can't Shawshank his way out of prison with the weld bar. But Mattis continues.
Funny thing, in the interview on StarWars.com, they reference Shawshank is a point of reference for these.
It's just because they're digging out of a prison. That's it. It's the only reason. There's nothing else about... And, I'm not, the biggest Shawshank Redemption fan in the world. It's a fine movie, but, it's not like that. Anyway, so, it's just, there's this thing where, people work on, Marvel movies or Star Wars movies or Star Wars books need to try to feel, better about themselves, so they, reference... Not that Shawshank is, actual... That's a middle-brow movie and everything, but, they'll reference actually I was thinking about the rules of the game when I was writing this Captain America movie, and it's go fuck yourself. Anyway, so Mattis continues to lose hope until he trips over a metal rod one day. He uses his foot to cover it with dirt before the guards notice, and if he can figure out a way to get hold of this without being seen, then he'll have his escape tool. They make another few rounds on the fence before he trips over the rod again and falls, this time face first into the mud. He can't just reach over and grab it, though, because he'll be noticed. But Emos, to the rescue, she grabs Mattis's weld bar, not the rod, but the weld bar, and attacks Patch, the stormtrooper, thus distracting their captors briefly. Mattis grabs the rod, and where does he put it? He's not sure. Where am I going to put it? And then he hears a voice. Down your pants! Is this the Force, Mattis thinks? Of course. So could it be the Force? And then, no, he's a dummy. He's a big dummy. No, of course it's just Joe who's there, and he's quickly hide that thing. So Joe, maybe he's not on the First Order side. Maybe he's a double agent, baby. And so, once everyone's gotten up, Patch leads Emos back to the palace ahead of Mattis and Joe, who kind of hang back out of earshot, and Joe explains that Wanton believes that he is on the First Order's side, and Joe wants to meet with Mattis and Lorica alone to coordinate their escape. He thinks Wanton's trust in him will allow him to, quote-unquote, interrogate them. So he wants them to tell him everything they know about the Resistance, so he can make up a believable lie to tell Wanton out of pieces of the truth. Whose side is he on?
So Ingo, he returns Lorica to her cell. They're all flirty and fun, and they find Mattis in a muddy, angry, jealous heap. Ingo leaves Lorica, and Lorica, she's trying to figure out what's wrong with Mattis, and his mind is too consumed by the scratching and laughter in the walls, and Lorica, she doesn't hear it, and also the thought of Lorica and Ingo fucking is just too much for him. So Lorica, she tries to explain how she's trying to...
They're both minors, they're just kissing, let's be fair.
Okay, all right. Sure. Sure, teens only kiss.
This is a classic bit. You are not remembering the bit.
So Lorica, she's explaining how she's trying to get them out, and she's saying she'll do whatever she can. She'll even join the First Order if that means getting them out. And this sends Mattis over the edge. He cannot think of this. Goes against everything he believes. And Ingo returns, and at the sight of Mattis, he's like, you know what? I'm going to move Lorica. I'm getting you and Cost out of here for the night. So he pulls them out. And night comes, and Mattis can't sleep. There's too much scratching, too much laughter. But it stops, and his mind clears. And he was like, oh, damn, that tool. I forgot all about it. So he pulls it out, and he starts chipping away at the wall. and he makes a small amount of progress. It starts off easy, but it gets more and more difficult, and then the scratching returns, and Mattis, he starts to wonder if he's truly lost his mind, just like how when you lose all your money, you declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So he believes that he's starting to hallucinate, and when he is quote-unquote hallucinating, he sees Ingo standing outside his cell, and there's a light coming from behind him, so he's in silhouette, and Ingo, he opens the door, and he walks away, and Mattis, he's like, ooh, should I run? I don't know. But then all of a sudden, Moss comes charging into the room, and she's probably going to kill him. She grabs him, but suddenly from his tiny hole is a weird squirrelish character, and this weird squirrelish character takes Moss down. And this tiny creature, which is about thigh high, he introduces himself as Gerd and tells him that he is a Nanyak. And he served Hera the Hutt. Hera was his mistress. But when the First Order came, he hid in the walls while Hera and the droids were shipped off in a pod. And he has been the one doing all the scratching and laughing because he's having a good time pestering the First Order. So, but then somebody is coming, and it's AG. And AG walks up and closes the door, so now Mattis can't escape. But he's not alone. He's got Gerd to help him eventually escape.
So, I want to say something about Gerd. Gerd is like the most poor man's version of Dobby the house elf from Harry Potter that has ever existed. Everything he does, I'm just like, oh, I wish I was just reading Harry Potter right now. He's like, I don't, whatever. He lives in the walls. He like annoys our hero, but the hero loves him. And obviously, there are other characters that fit that description, but he just is so like specifically like he's, I don't know, and he's like obsessed with serving his master and all that stuff. It's just very Dobby. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, so chapter 12. Did you finish, right?
Yeah, I'm done. Keep going.
I'm sorry.
We're almost there.
Okay. It's fine. This episode's going to be actually one of the shorter ones, I think. Lorica is frustrated by Mattis's neediness and his bullshit, but she must admit to herself that she also appreciates his heroic qualities, whatever those may be. And so, while she's pondering this in her cell, Joe comes to see her. She knows she shouldn't trust him, but her Zeltron powers don't necessarily reveal any sort of treachery or deception coming from him. He tells her he's working to get them out of there, including AG, which she thinks is strange since AG has been reprogrammed. And so he then asks her to provide some more information about the Resistance, as Wanten is tired of hearing about droid specs, which is all he's been telling him, apparently. And so he asks, what about the location of the base, perhaps? And now the location of the base was hidden from the recruits when they arrived, but Lorica had figured it out. It's Dakar, which is the planet in Force Awakens that the base is on. Even if she was beginning to trust Joe again, she wasn't about to tell him that. So she tells him that the base is on Endor, and justifies this by saying that she ran into an Ewok while she was out for a run. He's surprised by this, but says he's going to tell Wanten that the base is on a totally different planet, far away from Endor. Oh, how about Dakar? Joe is still acting pretty slippery. He tells her not to give up hope and leaves. After he leaves, Kost tells Lorica that she's confused. She tells her that she's not sure if they can trust Joe, but regardless, plans are underway for an escape, and when they escape, Kost will be welcome to come with them. But Kost is very confused, very confused. And so anyway, we move on to Wanten in his throne room. He's obsessed with catching the Nanak in the walls of his throne room, Gerd, Dobby. And so after all, it's stealing his food, and he enjoys food, guys. he's a big fat fatty boy is another thing they took from Harry Potter. All the fat shaming, which I love in Harry Potter and found annoying in this somehow. I don't know. Like, I don't know. You need to like be funny. Like, you need to actually be funny and not just like, oh, he really likes food and like.
Yeah, because there's a difference between like funny fat people and then just not funny.
Like, to use Harry Potter as an example, Uncle Vernon, the way that J.K. Rowling describes Uncle Vernon is funny, just because he's also like vain, and that's kind of what they're going for here. But it's just like, I don't know. Maybe it's just I was frustrated with the book in general, and so this stuff didn't work for me. But there's lots of fat jokes all through this chapter. I won't list all of them, but whatever. So the stormtroopers are just blasting holes in the walls, trying to hit the Nanak, and they're always just missing it. Wanton is kind of getting frustrated with his post here. The palace always requires constant maintenance. His favorite stormtrooper died while mending the fence, and he doesn't like these resistance brats. He's not going to openly disrespect Joe Gergerod because his family is a big deal, but he's growing impatient with the bullshit info he's being fed. And so maybe the Zeltron girl knows more, he thinks. I don't know. Then Ingo Salik shows up to the throne room. And Ingo, I don't know if you mentioned this, he's the second in command at the compound. And Wanton hates this guy, mostly because he's young and thin. Ugh. And Wanton is old and fat. So anyway, he has the third pilot. Ingo Salik brought the third pilot, who was chasing Dek and Sari earlier, and he's back like a week later to report. And apparently, that moon didn't show up on scans, according to this guy anyway, because it's entirely populated by droids who told this pilot, this First Order pilot, that they had destroyed Dek and Sari's ship and murdered the passengers, murdered Dek and Sari. Oh no, they're dead. Apparently, that's happened all off screen. So they kept the pilot captive for a while, but he was able to escape and get to his ship, which the droids had spared because they, quote-unquote, said First Order ships are the best ships. And Wanton doesn't want to send a bunch of resources towards finding that moon again, which pisses off Ingo, but oh well. Ingo has also brought along Cost, who was apparently the informant prisoner the whole time. Wow. Wow.
Betrayal on Vodran.
Anyway, she is nervous, but Wanton welcomes her in with open arms. He did make her a promise that, she would get more blankets and all that stuff, but he has no intention of keeping those promises. He's an evil fat boy. And so, Cost first tells them that Joe Gergerod doesn't like Wanton. This is not valuable info, Cost. And that she's very confused. She's like, what are you talking about? What do you want? Are they going to give me what they promised me? I don't understand. I'm all out of place. I'm so fucked up. And she lets it slip out. Gergerod is all about the resistance, and they're all going to escape. She immediately regrets saying it, and then she just makes something up. When they come back, they're going to explode this place. That's what she says. Whatever.
Is that all?
That's it.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. So after his daily patrol, Mattis returns to his cell to find the bunk broken by Yamos repaired. So it's like, was that a hallucination? Did all that happen? Was whatever that Nanak's thing's name, Gerd, was Gerd actually there? But Lorca and Cost are back, and AG and Ingo show up. And they're looking for this Nanak. And AG searches the room but finds nothing. And there's a moment where Ingo makes a joke about Wanton, and Mattis thinks he hears AG laugh, which is odd for a First Order droid. Then Wanton shows up, and he throws Deck's jacket onto the floor to announce that Deck is dead, and then he throws a bloody and beaten Joe into the cell. He announces he's going to call Joe's parents, and he's going to torture Lorca and Mattis. And he's convinced that mangling these miners is going to get him a promotion.
You like to mangle some miners.
No.
I'm not making that up. I'm sorry. Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Jesus,
That's it. I kept that one
I'm
short.
sorry, guys, if we don't see it as present as we normally are. First of all, it's like fucking 80 degrees in this room, and I had to turn the air conditioning off, and I want to die. So anyway.
I would say we're almost there, but the next chapter we're going to have to stop and talk.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well,
oh yes.
Okay, but first let's get through this. Chapter 14. Deck and Sari have been in the captivity of the droids for upwards of a week. The head of the droids is a droid named J9A. She tells them that the First Order dude has left and believes them to be dead, so they are safe from the First Order, but are they safe from the droids? We don't know. J9A is, quote, tired of being underestimated. So this is like a Solo type situation, maybe. Who knows? Again, not my favorite strain of current Star Wars storytelling. Deck decides that they should escape. Sari doesn't know what good it would do, because if they escape, they'd still be on this unfindable moon, and they don't have any way off of it. And Sari tries to hack into the door to their cell, and after a few unsuccessful attempts at that, Deck tries slamming himself into the door to break it down, hurting himself in the process. Then Sari just kicks down the door. She's apparently that strong, she can just kick the door down in one go, no problem. And off they go, into the darkness, into the void.
Back on Vodran,
Oh boy.
Lorca and Mattis swear
Oh boy.
to Joe, we're going to bust out of here, and they reveal their plans of digging and seduction. Joe, he sees Mattis's hole and makes fun of it, and Mattis yells back, "Don't make fun of my hole." This leads to more bickering between Lorca and Mattis. It's like these two are married or something.
Boy.
So Joe tells them to pipe down because he's already accepted his fate. He's going to be turned over to the First Order, but he's pretty sure his parents won't have him killed because they're his parents. That would be very severe, but he's certain he will never see the Resistance or any of them again. This leads to reminiscing about all the good times they had back on the Resistance base. And we reveal another moment that was unseen in the last book. And this is not just a reveal for these characters, but this is a huge reveal for a very sideline character featured in that book, a fan favorite, Snap Wexley.
Oh, yes.
And it's Snap Wexley's wedding.
Snap Wexley's married!
Snap Wexley's married to Kara Coon, which sounds a hell of a lot like the actress Carrie Coon, famous for the TV show The Leftovers.
One of the great actresses of our time.
I
Carrie
agree.
Coon, props,
She's amazing.
Gone Girl, Leftovers, Fargo. She plays some CGI character in Avengers Infinity War. She's going to be in the new Ghostbusters, apparently. She's a great actress,
Ooh,
though.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's
Yes.
I guess she's like
If-
the mom
if-
of the kid from Stranger Things in that or something. And then,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
If you're a fan of the other J.J. Abrams joint Lost, well, the pilot, definitely check out The Leftovers. It's Damon Lindelof's follow-up show. Lots of the very Lost feeling show in a completely different way. Anyway,
Leftovers is great.
Leftovers is the best. If you have HBO, get on that now. Also, if you have HBO, get on Show Me a Hero starring Oscar Isaac.
Yes!
I think it's
Yes!
the best thing Oscar Isaac has ever done.
It's an incredible
incredible.
Well, inside Llewyn Davis, maybe. But yes.
They're both up there,
But
1 and 2.
I
Inside
will-
Llewyn Davis, Show Me a Hero.
For sure. I will also say this. We're time-stamping this. You're like, man, how do they know about all this brand new stuff? But you excited about HBO Max, baby?
Oh yeah, I'm. That's where I'm going to get Friends now from now on.
Yeah, that classic HBO show, Friends. Diluting the brand is all I'm saying. Anyways.
Speaking of HBO, the Larry Sanders Show, Rip Torn died. R.I.P. Rip Torn.
That show's a masterpiece. Go back and watch that show.
Okay, so Snap Wexley's wedding. Poe Dameron personally assigned J Squadron to prepare this entire wedding.
J Squadron is this group of characters from this book. I don't think we've said that.
Yes, that's their group.
Yes.
So J Squadron is doing everything, and it's going to be a secret wedding, except everybody at the Resistance base is going to be in attendance, except for leadership. So Akbar and Leia, they aren't invited. Actually, this has a continuity issue that we will cover at the end of the episode. But because of... they said the leader, they aren't invited, they got a lot on their plate, so we're keeping this undercover. So AG's in charge of music. Saori, she sets the aisle. Klimo and Mattis are in charge of making a special delicacy for the event. And I'm going to read a handful of pages here, but they must be read aloud because this is apparently... This is Acker and Blacker at their finest. So we're starting on 249.
Okay, I don't have page numbers on my digital copy. 1 second.
There's no dialogue. There's not a whole lot of dialogue here, so I'm just going to read it all on my own.
I just want to follow along.
So this is going to take a hot minute. So Mattis was handy in the kitchen. Growing up an orphan on a farm in Dirktiel, he learned to prepare foods with meager supplies for younger kids. Oddly Muva of the Black Squadron gained Mattis access to the mess hall, and Mattis and Klimo got to work. Mattis mixed up some crackling pudding from crackling pods and canned bantha milk. He had wished he had kept an eye on his concoction, though, because later he learned when he wasn't looking, Klimo took the opportunity to throw in a dash of analam, a powdered flavoring harvested from izzy leaves, and Mattis didn't know where Klimo had found the izzy leaves. They were all later laughing and farting too hard to figure it out. As the host, Joe had the not-so-bright idea of all the attending guests, which included everybody on the base except for leadership, should eat Mattis's pudding before the ceremony, which meant... that everyone was happy and full during a dewy-eyed procession and heartfelt vows. Poe Dameron himself officiated the wedding of his friends. If he felt the same rumbling in his guts that everybody else did as the ceremony proceeded, he was too cool a customer to show it. But he must have, for when it came time for him to ask Snap, Wexley took Kara Kun to be his wife, he only got as far as, "Snap, do you take Kara Kun to be your..." before his insides erupted into the most atmospheric flatulence into the galaxy had ever heard. Everybody laughed because they sympathized. Their insides were doing somersaults as well. But Poe Dameron, always cool, too true, he began asking again, "Do you, Snap, take Kara Kun to be your wife?" managing to get the whole sentence out that time. Snap was not so lucky. He began, and what followed was a 4-alarm fart that lasted longer than the ceremony itself had thus far. A wave of laughter washed over the crowd, and then again, when Kara, in disbelief, yelled at her soon-to-be husband, she let out a deep, meteoric toot herself. She slapped both hands over her face, completely embarrassed, as Snap, Poe, and everybody else just let laughter rain, because soon everybody who had eaten the crackling pudding was sounding off like firecrackers, tooting and honking, letting loose with all kinds of gassy exclamations. It was mortifying and uproarious all at once. Mattis stood beside Joe, who emitted a high-pitched "wheat" that was unlike anything anybody had ever heard, because we all know Joe's a tight ass. After that, Joe glared at Mattis as to say, "This is your fault," but his anger, however, was undercut by another flatulent bellow, and then peals of laughter that he just couldn't help. None of them could. Among squeals of laughter and clamor of gut-ripping gas, Snap and Carol were married. AG, Audie, and some of the others struck up a happy musical beat, and everybody on the Resistance base laughed and danced and farted late into the night. Who allowed this, Tim?
Okay.
Who?
Listen,
Who?
listen, this is what I have to say about this. This is by far not just the most interesting part of the book, but the best part of the book.
I agree.
If the whole point of this series was just like goofy potty humor like Captain Underpants Star Wars, I'd be all about it. It's like the only part of the book that feels inspired in any way. Like, I think it's insane that this is like a canonical scene with like movie characters. And do you think that maybe like they put in the thing about the leadership not being there, but they initially wanted to have Leia there, but they were like, we can't do that with our like heartfelt message about Carrie Fisher and like have her just farting all through?
Yes, I do believe that, and we'll get into that because that's where a continuity error arises in this. But I will say that I think this is the most insane piece of Star Wars literature I have ever read,
and
I don't.
Flashback here?
Yes, and I don't think that there is anything else like this. I mean, we've had burp jokes in Star Wars before.
Yeah.
Many burp jokes. George was a fan of burp jokes. We've had one fart joke in episode 1.
Yeah.
But not this level of farts.
This fart joke is like BFG style fart joke. Like, like it's insane. It's like, and you know that's for my BFG heads out there. You should watch that movie. Spielberg is a master of his
movie
craft.
Rules.
He's a master of his craft and crafts the ultimate fart joke in cinematic history. In that movie. But anyway, when the Queen of England farts, it's the greatest.
Yes, that's so funny. Back to the book. Back in their cells, they weren't punished for this because everybody had such a good time farting. So as they reminisce about this, Mattis, he as to punctuate his point, released a prolonged monotone fart. "Oh, Mattis, come on," Lorica yelled, waving her hands in front of her face. "You know you had fun too," Mattis scolded. "Admit it, you like us." And so, lots of farts. This leads to Cost having an episode where she reveals that she's the one who ratted them out. She's the narc. And this makes Joe very angry. But before he can rip her a new one, Ingo shows up. And he's like, that's what we do. We make you fight each other so you don't fight us. We give you secrets or we take them away. Isn't that right, Lorica? Do you want to tell the group the secrets you have? And color drains from her face. And Mattis, he's certain he doesn't want to hear them.
So
that's the end of the chapter.
Meanwhile, back on the moon, they're groping their way through the darkness in this escape attempt, Dek and Sari are, and Dek's hand touches some slimy flesh. That can't be Sari. No! It's a hut! Just as Dek realizes this, they're all surrounded by the droids again, and the hut is revealed to be Hera the Hutt herself. And the droids were apparently her servants and protectors before the First Order took over her palace on Vodran. And when the First Order let Hera go, they allowed her to bring the droids. And J9A is a navigation droid, so she found this ghost moon, which is called Cuffs. And underneath the surface of Cuffs is a liquefied reserve of the metal Nicult, which apparently can reflect ultra high frequency scans, so the planet is invisible to everything but the naked eye. Deck is very fascinated by all this and everything, but can they get a ship or nah? And J9A is like, nah, you all are here to stay. Seemingly forever.
So, we now go to, let's see here. So, Ingo, he is about to reveal Lorca's secret. Mattis is fuming with jealousy. And Lorca's apparent pheromones are he's not attracted to her, he's getting all hot and bothered by them. And Ingo tells them that Lorca, she's going to join the First Order. And full of rage, Mattis can't contain himself. He says to Ingo, you know what, she's only using you to get us out of here. She's only cozying up to you so that you let us out, destroying her week's worth of work. Ingo, who is now equally pissed, he says, I'm done with you fools, and he opens the door to pull Joe away. This is when Lorca pounces. She is unrelenting as she's throwing punches and all sorts of things at his way. At one point, she slams his head off of the bunk and then pushes him, and his head hits the concrete wall. This is when Mattis and Joe, they're like, okay, we got to get out of here. So they try to run out of the cell, only to be stunned by stormtroopers. They both pass out.
So, J9A, the droid back on the moon, throws Dek and Sari into a new cell with Hera. Why is she in a cell if they love her so much? Very confusing. Dek complains about the Hutt smell, and J9A says, be respectful of the great Hera the Hutt. And so Sari shoots Dek a look, telling him, calm down, or they're never going to get out of there. And J9A says that they'll have to figure out the food situation, since they've only had to provide for Hera up to this point. And apparently Sari can cook. And J9A is like, oh good. She leads Sari to the kitchen, leaving Dek behind with Hera. And Dek tries to get Hera to talk to him. When he mentions his home planet of Kess, she reminds him that it is in Hutt space and that she enjoys the privileges of the taxes paid by the people of Kess. Those taxes apparently really did hurt his particular poor community, but despite all this, he tries to be friendly with her, and he tells her about how he felt like an outcast among his people on Kess because he got depressed sometimes or something, and apparently AG is the one that made him feel better about himself. And this opens Hera up. She starts talking about her missing her pets on Vodran. She loves her pets, all the little beasties, and even though they fight, that's in their nature, she says. She doesn't want to force anything upon their natures. And so the other Hutts thought it was weird how much she liked her pets, which is why she was sent to Vodran, well out of Hutt space, out of their hair. And even though they enslaved the entire native population of Vodran, Hera feels like she's a nice slave master or something. Okay. And Dek's only response to this is, you're a complicated woman. Just like Bill Clinton's a complicated man. So, anyway, so she loved all her little beasties, but most of all, she loves her Nanak, Gerd. And Dek says, Gerd might still be alive and waiting for you. And so, this is all she needs to be convinced to demand a ship from J9A, who apparently loves her, and they're going to return to Vodran and save her Nanak, and Dek's friends also, in the meantime.
Alright, so Mattis wakes up and Joe is gone. He's being shipped out to his parents today! Lorca has lost all hopes of escaping, but then AG shows up, and unsurprisingly, his whole reprogram was a ruse. Joe, it had all been set up by Joe. AG was fine the whole time. It was all an act. And he's there to help them escape. They open the door. They take Kost with them. They head down the hall to a few cell blocks to Yamas's cell. And AG opens the door. She growls something and Kost says, oh, she's pissed. But AG, he's like, that's not what she said. You can't translate anything she's saying. You've been making it up for the whole time. That Borgullet's certainly done a trick on you. Anyway, AG explains that Yamos was only trying to help them the whole time. When she went to attack mode when they were working on the fence, she did it as a distraction because, like everybody else, had seen the tool on the ground and noticed that Mattis kept trying to trip over it so that he could grab it. However, this offers no explanation to why she tried to kill them the first time they were in the prison yard, or the hallucination scene where we meet Gerd, which we still don't know was a hallucination or not. Clearly, he had actually met Gerd, so there's an element of truth to it.
Yeah.
By the way, Yamos has been digging her own hole this whole time, and it's much larger than Mattis's hole. But Mattis's hole is never ending, if you know what I mean. They crawl and trudge through 10 grav-ball courts of muck, kind of like Shawshank Redemption, and then suddenly alarms go off. And then Joe shows up, and he's on a wheeled bike, a bike with wheels, and Mattis is all like, I didn't even think they made wheeled anything anymore. Then stormtroopers show up, including Patch Adams, and they gun it for the fence. Joe, he rips the bike, he gives it full throttle, he rips through the fence. They all run through, and there's already some Rancors at the fence, and they burst into the fence, and they see an easy meal, and they grab the stormtroopers.
So, they keep running, but a couple of surviving stormtroopers, surviving that Rancor attack, they catch up, including Patch, and they engage them in a fight. Mattis is beating dudes' heads in with his metal rod, and he accidentally throws a switch, and whoa! It's a lightsaber!
Huh?
Mattis is a big fucking idiot, by the way. He's obsessed with the Jedi, and he can't recognize a lightsaber hilt, and he can't just be like, what's this switch do?
Right? You know what? He's been bashing it against like a stone wall. It's amazing he didn't like activate the thing and just like cut his own head off. Right, which would have been amazing if he did.
Anyway, so stormtroopers look scared for a minute, but when Mattis tries to swing the lightsaber, it flies out of his hand and deignites. Then Lorica picks up the lightsaber and just crushes. She defeats the stormtroopers, no problem. Mattis asks her if she's a Jedi, and she says, no such thing. Okay. Not believing in the Force, fine. I mean, there's plenty of, I think, pretty obvious evidence of the Force's existence in Star Wars, so it's always been a bit of a stretch when you have, non-believers in just the existence of the Force. But I'm fine with that. That's a reasonable metaphor for, all kinds of mystical ideas in our own life. But it's a reasonable statement to say you don't believe in God. It's an unreasonable statement you don't believe that Muslims exist or that Christians exist. Isn't that pretty unreasonable?
It's not unreasonable, and this is a time too where Luke Skywalker is around, and Luke is a Jedi.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. I'm sorry, and I would buy it if it's in the Age of the Empire where the Empire's doing all they can to suppress the Jedi's the history of the Jedi and all that stuff, but it's a pretty big stretch that. You could be any remotely reasonably educated person and be like, this entire group of people that we know existed and were part of the government of the Old Republic, they just didn't exist. There's no such thing. It's just, I don't know. I get what they were going for, but they obviously she doesn't believe in the Force is the idea, but it's then keep it focused on that. Don't say don't make her into a character that seems stupid. I don't anyway, so at this moment, a shuttle containing Wanten and more stormtroopers shows up, and Wanten demands that Joe be returned, or he'll kill the rest. He'll kill the rest of them. He's going to kill the rest of them anyway. And they all stand together and face Wanten and his goons. They can't fight him. They're not going to be able to. Overcome the power or the overwhelming number of them, but they're going to stand together as friends, etc., etc. And Mattis goes off about how it's just oh, I love my friends. Okay, So, just then, Hera the Hutt shows up in her ship and rains some laser shit down on Wanton and his goons. And this distracts everyone long enough for Wanton to grab Joe and escape, but everybody else survives. And so Hera's ship is followed by 4 fighters, including that have on them J9A, Dek, and Sari. Mattis is overjoyed to see Dek. Goes up, hugs him, because he is a hugger, unlike Lorica or whoever, you know what. These are the kinds of asides I don't really like in the prose. But anyway, so, I'm sorry I don't have a more specific thing to explain. I apologize. But there's a point earlier in the book where he's like, he would hug Joe, but he wanted to hug Joe, but he didn't. Joe's not a hugger. And then here it's like, he did go up to hug Dek. Dek is a hugger. It's like, ugh, whatever. Corny. So, Hera the Hutt offers her transport to the crew in exchange for Lorica's lightsaber. Lorica gives it up, done deal, and Hera flies back to her palace, waving around the lightsaber, singing "I'm a Jedi" to herself, and Lorica's just stewing over there. It's just like, the Jedi never even existed. She doesn't do that.
Maybe she should have joined the First Order. She seems like she's
Jedi
in
don't
there.
exist? Like, come on. Like, what is this? I know that's probably not what they meant, but it's like, somebody should have caught that and been like, you want to make this into like a Force thing instead of specifically the Jedi who objectively exist in this universe, no matter what you think of them?
There is one very strange thing that came from that interview on StarWars.com that I did pick up on, and they mentioned that the first book here, I gotta scroll up in my notes, the first book was edited by senior Lucas film editor, Lucas Arts or whatever, Jen Heddle.
Yeah, she's the editor of a lot of Star Wars books, yeah.
Yes. However, they offhand mentioned that book 2 was edited by, quote, our editor, and they don't give the name of that editor. Oh. So whoever edited this book was not Lucasfilm associated. So I think that's how some of these weird things, like possibly this fart scene,
See, the fart scene I'm okay with. This is the thing that made me mad in the book the most, just because it's like, why are you having this reasonably smart character just say she doesn't believe in, like, history? Like, I don't know. She's... and again, I'm not saying she needs to believe in the Force. Like, that's one thing, you know, but, like... although there seems to be plenty of public evidence of the Force in Star Wars, so I've always found that a stretch, but it's certainly fine. I'm fine with that, like, but... Come on. I know I've talked about this to death. Anyway, so somebody asks AG, can you fly that transport? And he says, I can fly anything. AG's not Poe. You don't just steal a line from, like... like, I don't know. I'm sorry. Like, that's like one of the coolest lines in Force Awakens. It's like, why are you taking that, like, line from Poe? It's stupid. Anyway, they take off, and they plan to rescue Joe. That's the end of the book. So, I'm sorry if we seem aggressively negative on this episode. I don't necessarily hate this book, but I found it very frustrating. Like,
this
by
book
hate,
is
I mean, I'm not going to give it like a 0 or a 1 or anything, but like, it's a very frustrating book.
It's something that's like, it's out there in terms of Star Wars, in terms of like what we've been reading. This book is all over the place. One good thing I will say about this book is there is no Gungan prejudice in this book. Dek does not make any sort of derogatory remarks about Gungans.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
However,
wasn't one of the main reasons we wanted to read these books because like there was supposedly a Gungan character in them? Like
that's what we were told.
But
Joe says his best friend is a Gungan.
Maybe we'll meet him in the third one, I guess. Ugh, I hope so.
I'm hoping. I'm really hoping, because if we don't meet this character, then, like, Dek is still going to be just a racist.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the book series.
There's just not a lot of... This is a problem, I think, that thematically and just on a basic storytelling level, there's just not a lot of follow-through in this book. Those droids on the droid planet are presented as very threatening.
And that's not follow. And they're like, we're keeping you here. But then, as soon as Hera the Hutt suggests that they go, that they get a ship, they allow them to leave. Like, there's no, like, they set up a potential conflict, and then they don't follow through on it all the time. All the time. No wonder they love Force Awakens. It's a very similar problem.
It is. It is.
It's like,
so
that's the most well-made. Leave dangling threads constantly, and not just dangling threads. Like just deliberately choosing not to resolve something for the convenience of the storytelling. It's not just like ambiguity. Like we were just talking about the Leftovers, how much we love the Leftovers. So I'm not like against ambiguity in storytelling. That's not what this is. It's just like we set up a conflict, and then the conflict, if it's resolved at all, either just disappears or was resolved off page, which is bad. That's just not good storytelling. Like I feel bad because these guys seem like nice guys. I think there's like I enjoy the like writing podcasts the guy hosts. I've enjoyed in the past. I think I'm sure there's probably like I'm sure they've written decent comics, decent TV shows, but these books feel very slapdash. They're not good prose writers. I can say pretty definitively at this point. I find a lot of their asides kind of just obnoxious and cutesy, and I just don't think these books are that good. I think some of the characters are interesting, but your main character is a vacuum at the center. It's the Dawson's Creek problem, except I like Dawson Leary way more than I like Mattis. And it's just, I don't know, it's fine. Like, listen, I'm not saying this is a disaster of a book. It's not like it's fine. There's like some fun new characters. I liked Hera the Hutt. I thought was funny. I enjoyed her. There's like bits I enjoy. But this is a 3 out of 10. 3 midichlorians at best.
Oh, wow! I'm giving it 2.
There we go.
2 midichlorians.
Yeah, and 3. Hey, I'm gonna give it to Lorica for the Force sensitive thing, since she might actually be Force sensitive, even if she doesn't believe in the Force. Because Mattis definitely isn't Force sensitive. Fuck out of here, Mattis.
I'm gonna give it to Wanten because I feel like he was set up as this main villain who really didn't do a whole much of villaining.
The mistake he made as a young man, which is set up very importantly early in the book, and then is never followed up on. Maybe he'll return in the 3rd book, but it's called Attack on Starkiller Base, so I assume that's very focused on the events of Force Awakens, just from these characters' perspectives. Would be my assumption anyway. But we'll see.
But I have a proposition for the Attack on Starkiller Base episode. We're going to give Acker and Blacker a shot at, book writing is not their strong suit, but maybe television writing is. And I think you and I should each watch an episode that they wrote of Puss in Boots, the Netflix Shrek spinoff. Yes. Okay. We should each watch the same episode, and then we should report back and see what we think of Acker and Blacker before we review Attack on Starkiller Base.
That's a great look forward to that in a few weeks. So do you have anything else to say about Escape from Vodran?
Oh, yeah. I have nothing else to say from Escape from Vodran other than some other little things. We should make a list of our top new canon characters and our bottom new canon characters, and I think we're both going to agree that Mattis is the worst new canon character.
He's my least favorite, certainly main character of any new canon thing I've read or seen.
Yeah,
he's
terrible.
That's not close. I'd have to go through with a comb and find maybe worse characters, but probably not.
So now we're going to get into a segment, a classic Padawan Library segment. Let's get into I Like That Wikipedia.
I'm not putting the drop in, guys, because we're recording this too late, and I don't want to be up all night.
That's true. So if you go on Wikipedia, you are going to find out that there is virtually no information about this book. So if you go into this book specifically, you're going to find a brief summary of what this book is, the publisher summary, and then you're going to find a section called continuity. And here we have some continuity problems with the book. And this first one kind of shows is going back to Acker and Blacker, maybe not following up on stuff that they've already talked about. So here we are. Previously, Join the Resistance established that the Cyclada cluster and the planet Vodran were located close to Quest, in a hut space. However, Join the Resistance escapes from Vodran states that they are in an outer rim territory and that Vodran isn't too near hut space. Escape from Vodran claims that Hera the Hutt stronghold was raided by the First Order, although the previous book stated that she abandoned the thing during an Imperial excursion. An Imperial excursion? The Empire hasn't existed for 30 years! And also, the book refers to Audi Movie, or Audi Muva, involvement in letting Mattis and Klimo into the kitchen. However, Muva died in the 19th issue of Poe Dameron, and the wedding is not proposed to be conducted until at least the 25th issue of the series.
I mentioned how I had been reading that. I only read the first arc, and I need to get back to it. The Poe Dameron comic series. It's much better than these, I'll say that.
Well, this leads into another thing. There is a page, a dedicated page called Snap and Kara's Wedding. Now, if you go onto Snap's Wikipedia page, they mention the wedding like this. Eventually, Wexley married Kun. The wedding was intended to be a secret, but after some poor planning by the young members of J Squadron, it became the worst-kept secret in the Resistance base. That's all it says.
Okay.
No farts, no toots. All right. On Kara's page, it says, after a harrowing mission, Kun and Wexley confessed their true feelings and were married. No flatulence at all.
Well,
so
they just don't mention the details. That doesn't necessarily contradict the book.
Okay. Well, here's where some weird more continuity issues show up. So, in this book, Poe Dameron officiates the wedding, but in issue 25 of Poe Dameron, where the wedding happens, Leia officiates the wedding.
Oh, well, and, I'll take issue 25 of Poe Dameron as the official canon. Sorry, Acker, Blacker. Listen, I like that scene. That's what gave you the 3. That's what bumped you up to the 3 on this book. I think that scene is funny, and it's the most alive the writing was, and I was just like, I want them, they should just be writing, like I said, Captain Underpants Star Wars. I would read that for sure. But, no. So
that's I like that Wikipedia for this week. Just in general, I haven't edited a Wikipedia article since I was in middle school because I had no friends and thought that was cool. That was a good way to pass my time. But if any of you out there want to transcribe this podcast and just post it to the Escape on Vodran page, that would be amazing because people need to know about this very flatulent wedding.
You should. If somebody wants to edit the Wikipedia and cite this episode, it would be cool if we had a Wikipedia citation. That would be cool.
That would be great. That would be very good. We actually have a Wikipedia account. I made a Padawan Library user account on there.
A Wikipedia page? What? You got me excited.
No, but maybe we can make because as a user, can't you make your own page? I'm pretty sure you can do that.
I haven't done it in years. So, regardless.
So,
wrapping up this episode turned out to not be too super long. It was the right idea to not do an intro.
Right, it was. However, I do have one last thing.
Of course.
I have 2 Amazon reviews.
This
book has this book has 5 reviews, and it averages 3 out of 5 stars. This first review from Philip Quinn, he gave it 3 stars, with the subject fun. He says, for the intended age group, I'm sure this novel is a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. However, the main character, Mattis, is not enjoyable to me in the least bit. I would prefer in the next book if Lorica became the main character.
Yes. Yes.
Very, very true. She is the much better character. Now we have another review, a 4-star review. This is from Grunge of Today. Its subject,
Grunge of Today?
another Grunge of Today. Another fun story from Acker and Blacker with even more likable, and then there's an ellipses afterwards. I don't know what he was trying to say. It's another fun story from Acker and Blacker with even more likable characters. Oh, that's it right there. Cost is hilariously insane. Hilariously insane. I don't know about that. She was not hilarious. And is my personal favorite character in the book. Okay.
All right.
The team is a little broken as a result of the previous book, but their charm is still felt in this book, even if the mood seems darker. Unfortunately, if you were a fan of Decker, sorry, as you should be, they don't get a whole lot of time to shine. There are also 2 pages that were, in my opinion, not the slightest enjoyable. I recommend just skipping 2 pages after someone mentions a wedding. The short story told about the wedding has one purpose that I can imagine, because it certainly doesn't add to the story. It's to be funny, and it fails at that singular task.
Oh. I am the opposite. I don't like any of the other stuff, and I like that scene.
I agree. This Grunge of Today likes all of the stuff that's like not great about this book, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, Grunge of Today needs to stop listening to Theory of a Dead Man and shit. I don't even know what's current grunge. I don't know.
Grunge is dead.
I'm like a massive I'm like an obsessive Pearl Jam dork, but come on. Anyways,
with the name and if you're a fan of grunge, I'm not trying to but you think you'd be okay with fart jokes.
I mean, I don't know what that really even means. I'm not sure.
I mean, if I'm thinking of grunge, let's say grunge humor.
There's no grunge humor.
I think grunge. If someone was saying to me grunge humor, I would think of toilet humor. It's a messy humor. If you get what I'm saying.
Okay. Anyway,
that's all I have for this book. That's
all
it.
All right. Let's wrap it up here. Next week, we return to Jedi Apprentice, The Death of Hope.
Thank God.
That's book number 15. We're nearing the end of Jedi Apprentice. We will return with the third and final Join the Resistance book, Attack on Starkiller Base, in 3 weeks. But next week, back to Jedi Apprentice, Death of Hope. Also, we're almost at the end of Jedi Apprentice, and after that's done, there's going to be 2 kind of special episodes. The first one right after we finish special edition number 2, The Followers. That will be a wrap-up where we do some lists celebrating the series a little bit. I've recorded an interview with someone. Nobody involved in the series. It's not anybody famous. It's just a friend of mine who is a fan of the series. And so...
It's Michelle, isn't it?
It is Michelle. Michelle is going to appear on the show, at least briefly for that. And I think maybe we'll bring her on for Jedi Quest, which she never read as a kid. So maybe we'll bring her on for a full episode for one of those when she's caught up. So anyway, regardless, that's going to be a fun episode. And we're also going to read Claudia Gray's book, Master and Apprentice, that came out earlier this year. And we're going to talk about that. We're not going to do a big full review because it's a real novel, so that would just be a 15-hour episode. But we're going to talk about that book in a casual way. And then the week after that, we are doing our mailbag episodes. So that'll be in September. So you guys got 2 months. You have 2 months to send in your questions. So please get them sent in to our email, padawanlibrary@gmail.com, or on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter @padawanlibrary.
Follow us there, rate and review us everywhere you find podcast.
Yes. Were you talking that whole time?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, whatever. I'm keeping this in.
That's fine. That's fine.
I don't want to do.
So
I want to do as little editing as possible. So if we were talking over each other, I'm sorry, guys.
We weren't.
I got a call.
We weren't.
I got another call, and there was like a
Oh.
there was a lot of interference in the connection. Whatever.
Who
Rate
cares?
and review us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, etc. We got another review on
5
Apple
stars
Podcasts.
only.
I appreciate that. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but thank you for that review. It was a good one. And
since today's episode was a little bit of a non-traditional episode in terms of format, we're going to end today's episode with a sketch. So, Tim, do you have anything else to say?
No, the sketch will be after our outro, so stay tuned for that.
So I think I'm going to give an intro to the thing, and then we'll just play it. Does that sound good? We won't do our usual outro?
I was going to... Well, okay, whatever. I was going to play the outro, and then it would just play after the outro. That was the plan.
All right. We'll do that.
That was
All
the
right, we'll
plan.
do our usual outro, and that's the plan. Sounds good. All right. Until the books are due back.
The library is closed.
Padawan Library is hosted and produced by Tim May and Levi Peretic. It is edited by Tim May. Our theme song is by the Astral Project. Our artwork is by Freddie Funbuns. Padawan Library is copyright 2019 by Tim May and Levi Peretic. All rights reserved.
I, Poe Dameron, have gathered you here today for the uniting of Karé and Temmin Snap Wexley. If anyone should protest this union, please speak now, or forever hold your... Excuse me. Do you, Temmin Snap Wexley, take Karé to be your... What? Snap, do you take Karé to be your wife?
I, Snap, take...
Snap! How could you? On our wedding...
What's going on in here? Admiral Akbar, sir, you need to get out of here right now. What do I look like, a fish-headed moron? I know something. I can't handle flatulence of that magnitude.